Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
The year-long squeeze on wages is showing signs of coming to an end. Official figures show the gap between inflation and wages narrowed between December and February. Other figures show unemployment has fallen to its lowest level since 1975. Our economics editor, Kamal Ahmed, has the details.
Over the last few years, I think things have been fairly tough, but we're beginning to feel a bit more confident about the future.
I'm lucky enough to have my own home. I've got 2 young kids and it's quite tough to provide for them.
It's nice to get a little wage increase, but by the time I've got it in one hand, it's out the other.
Just look a bit back over. Our income's a vital part of the economy, and away from the statistics, the real world, and how people are feeling about the year-long income squeeze.
As soon as we get a pay rise, rent goes up, food goes up, everything goes up. So that little pay rise is like, hello, goodbye.
Take my son. He got himself on the housing ladder. He's now got a young family, he's got twins. He needs to move up to a bigger house. They've only got a little masonette. He hasn't got a chance.
Just like Maria and Nigel, the wage squeeze is still true for many workers. But the evidence is growing that 2018 will be better than 2017. Let's look at the improving picture on incomes. If we look at last month's figures, they said wages were increasing by 2.6%. Today, that number rose to 2.8%, the highest for 3 years. And better news on jobs as well. Unemployment is at its lowest level since 1975. The head of the firm that employs Maria and Nigel and 170 others in West London reveals why things are looking up.
We went through a period where we had to reduce the size of the business, lay some people off. We had a very constrained environment for pay rises. Since that time, so over the last 3 or 4 years, we've seen maybe 20% a year growth in our business, and that's been reflected into significant pay rises for our staff.
There is one striking thing speaking to people here: the good times have not suddenly returned. Over the last decade, people's real incomes have hardly moved at all. How unusual is that? Well, the last time we saw figures on income that bad, Queen Victoria was on the throne. Wages are slowly being fixed and are rising, at the same time as the rate of the increase in prices is easing. A stronger pound meaning imports of things like food and fuel are cheaper. The outlook is still tough for 2018, but that income squeeze is drawing to an end. Kamal Ahmed, BBC News.
Now, wages are growing faster than prices for the first time in just over a year, marking the end of the squeeze on real incomes that has hobbled the economy, squeezed the consumer and brought misery to much of the high street. So are we now in the clear? Our economics correspondent Helia Ebrahimi is here. So tell us first, Helia, how significant is this?
Well, the data today shows that UK wages in February edged up 0.1% faster than inflation. Now, that doesn't sound like very much, but it's hugely significant because it means that wages grew faster than inflation for the first time in 13 months. And the problem over the last decade has been that we have felt poorer in real terms. We've sustained years of wage stagnation. And just when we got a pay rise, we got hit with higher inflation. And that's why we've been talking about the pay squeeze being so prevalent in the UK.
So is this a turning point for the economy?
Well, if it's sustained, it could be. But again, the issue is real incomes. How rich do we feel in the UK? And the data today certainly seems less to do with the information in the labour market than to do with what's been happening with the pound. Because just before the Brexit vote, you could get $1.48 for each pound. But then you had 2 major slumps wiping 18% off the value of sterling. Now, since 2017, sterling has recovered. And today it hit a high of around $1.43. So you have a higher pound and you see prices fall, you see inflation ease, and that means relatively we can do more with our wages.
So I hardly dare ask, is it all good news or not?
Well, it's good news today, but like everything in economics, there's a sting in the tail, because it certainly strengthens the case for Mark Carney and his mates to raise interest rates next month at the Bank of England. So just when you're celebrating the fact that tomatoes have got cheaper at your local supermarket, you come home to discover that your mortgage bill has gone up. And that's something that the Bank of England is going to have to think very carefully about.
One of these days we'll have a wholly good news story. Helena, thanks very much.
Now, for months now, inflation has been running higher than wages, meaning most people are getting relatively worse off and not better. But the latest figures suggest the tables might have been turned, at least for now. Wages are going up faster than the cost of living. The Office for National Statistics says in the 3 months to February, average weekly earnings rose by 2.8%. Adjusted for inflation, that means a real terms pay rise of 0.2%, the first real terms rise in 12 months. There was also an unexpected fall in unemployment, which was 4.2% in February, its lowest level in more than 4 decades.
Today is a very good day. Claudia Beaumont has just been offered a pay rise. After a year of feeling up against it financially, an increase of 50p an hour will make a difference.
It enables me to not just pay my bills and be safe and feel that I'm able to pay them. It also means that I can go out and enjoy myself as a 20-year-old.
You can have a social life too.
Exactly.
Inflation is finally falling, and Claudia's boss says he can feel it. The cost of butter shot up after the referendum, but prices now feel more stable, and he's in a position to pay more.
We want to make sure that we're paying our staff above the minimum that's required, but we have to be mindful that we're a small business as well, so we have to manage our costs. So it's finding a balance between the two.
Britain's vote to leave the EU triggered a slump in the pound, which has pushed prices up. But Brexit is not the only reason living standards have been under pressure. Pay rises have been unusually feeble for a long time.
The Resolution Foundation calculates that average pay stands at £482 a week. Now, the good news is that figure is rising, but the bad news is when adjusted for inflation, it's £14 a week lower than it was 10 years ago, which means the average worker in real terms is £750 a year worse off today than they were in 2008.
Unemployment is extremely low and vacancies are at record high levels, so there's pressure on companies to continue paying more. But this economist believes that pay growth will remain subdued by historic standards.
I think 2018 is going to be much easier, much happier year than 2017 was, but what we're not looking at is anything which takes us back to the sort of world we had pre-2008. Even at the best over the course of this year, I don't think we're going to get pay growth back up to the sorts of levels that we took for granted.
You're going to sit up.
Meanwhile, for Russell Pope and the 5 million people who work in the public sector, the squeeze continues. Russell works at the local hospital. His family's still feeling the effects of years of government pay caps and freezes.
Our rent goes up.
Rent, council tax, any sort of child's activity.
Yeah, the children can't go to after school clubs.
I think a lot of the school trips are becoming out of our budget.
News that real pay is growing again is reason to bake a cake, but stronger pay growth also strengthens the case for interest rate rises, which not everyone will be celebrating. Joel Hills, News at 10 in Worthing.